Adam Silver's secret exposed, paying players in a huge gambling scandal. Fans are furious as the NBA faces its biggest crisis ever.
The gambling companies are absolutely telling Adam Silver what to do. I mean, it's a disaster.
The NBA is in chaos after it came out that gambling companies pushed Adam Silver to punish teams for tanking. The fines given to the Utah Jazz and Indiana Pacers weren't really about protecting fans or fair play. They were about protecting betting lines. Fans are angry, and this could put Silver's job at risk. But here's what happened. On February 12th, 2026, the NBA fined the Utah Jazz $500,000 and the Indiana Pacers $100,000 for conduct harmful to the league. The Jazz have been sitting starters like Lauri Markkanen, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Joseph Nurkic during the fourth quarter of winnable games. One example, on February 7th, they lost to Orlando after blowing a 17-point lead. The Pacers rested Tyrese Halliburton, Pascal Siakam, Andrew Nembhard, and Aaron Nesmith in a loss to Utah. Even though the league said all those players were healthy enough to play 2 days after the fines, Silver didn't hold back at his All-Star Weekend press conference on February 14th, 2026. He called this year's tanking worse than recent years and said the NBA would consider tough actions, including revoking draft picks and changing the draft lottery. He admitted the current system isn't working. What we're seeing right now is not working. There's no question about it. He talked about fans, saying, "We'd better not lose sight of our fans here. We'd better not lose sight of the people who support this league day in and day out." It sounded like he was defending the sport, but just 2 days later, on February 16th, 2026, a different story came out. Ben Golliver, a former Washington Post NBA writer and co-host of the Greatest of All Talk podcast, revealed another side to the situation. On his podcast, Ben Golliver said, "We know how much the NBA has gotten in bed with gambling. Over/unders are at stake. Player props are at stake." He explained, "If coaches just randomly bench players for entire games without warning, you're going to upset a lot of gamblers and gambling companies." This sheds a whole new light on the situation. If Golliver is right, the fines, Silver's press conference, and threats to revoke draft picks weren't mainly about fans. They were about sportsbooks losing money when starters were suddenly pulled, messing up betting lines set by DraftKings, FanDuel, and other partners. Golliver pointed to the Utah Jazz as a prime example. Pulling starters in the fourth quarter of close games affects over/unders, point spreads, and player prop bets. Bets that should have been fair get distorted, and sportsbooks take unexpected losses. Reports say gambling companies even pressure the NBA to act, focusing more on protecting betting stability than on the integrity of the games. And just like that, the story changed. The question wasn't whether the NBA should punish tanking. It was who the punishment was really for. At his press conference, Adam Silver didn't mention gambling at all. He focused on fans, the draft, and systemic fixes. He talked about the deep 2026 draft class as a reason teams were tanking and stressed that all teams needed to take responsibility together. But what he didn't say spoke volumes. He didn't mention DraftKings, FanDuel, or the billions of dollars flowing between the league and its betting partners. That silence, combined with Golliver's reporting, highlighted a big gap between Silver's words and what was actually going on behind the scenes. The tanking epidemic. To understand why this matters, look at the scale of tanking in the 2025-26 NBA season. This isn't just a few teams losing games at the end of the year. About 1/3 of the league is clearly trying to get top draft picks, and they started earlier than ever. The reason is simple. The 2026 draft class, with prospects like Cooper Flagg, Ace Bailey, and AJ Dembélé, is considered one of the most talented in years. In today's NBA, a single superstar can change a franchise for a decade. That makes the incentive to finish with a poor record extremely strong. A top draft pick isn't just a player. It's a potential superstar, a jersey seller, and a reason for fans to stay engaged for years. The Utah Jazz became the face of the tanking problem. With a record of 18-38, they had no real shot at the playoffs and every reason to aim for a high lottery pick. Their approach was bold. Play normally for 3 quarters, then pull starters and collapse in the fourth. coach Will Hardy faced heavy criticism. Even after acquiring Jaren Jackson Jr. at the trade deadline to compete, the Jazz limited his playing time in the moments that mattered most. The $500,000 fine was the biggest tanking penalty the NBA had ever issued, but it didn't seem to change the Jazz's behavior. The Indiana Pacers were a different, but equally worrying case. Just a year after reaching the NBA Finals, they fell to 15-40. Their strong start of 63-1, I think you meant 6-31, showed this wasn't just a rough patch. Injuries played a role. Tyrese Halliburton was recovering from an Achilles issue, but the team also had a structural incentive. They owed Toronto a 2026 first-round pick protected in the top 8. If Indiana finished in the bottom 8, they kept the pick, making losses potentially valuable. But the Jazz and Pacers weren't alone. The Washington Wizards sat at 14-39 after shutting down Anthony Davis for hand and groin injuries and Trae Young with a leg issue. Whether these shutdowns were medically needed or strategically convenient, the effect was the same. The league's tanking epidemic continued. The Washington Wizards were deep in the tanking race, aiming for top prospects like Ace Bailey to continue their rebuild. The Brooklyn Nets, at 15-38, had fully committed to rebuilding after using 5 first-round picks in the 2025 draft. Their young roster, low assist numbers, and reliance on volume scores like Cam Thomas showed losses were intentional, not accidental. The Sacramento Kings, at 12-44, had the worst record in the league. A 14-game losing streak pushed them to play young players over veterans, clearly trying to secure the top draft pick. The New Orleans Pelicans, at 15-41, had traded their unprotected 2026 first-round pick to Atlanta, meaning every Pelicans loss improved the Hawks' draft position, a perverse incentive that made things even more complicated. Other teams also contributed to the tanking epidemic. Dallas Mavericks, 19-35, struggled after the Luka Doncic trade. Portland Trail Blazers were rebuilding amid fallout from the Shanda Phillips indictment. Los Angeles Clippers were accused of tanking for a pick owed to the Oklahoma City Thunder. Charlotte Hornets and Chicago Bulls quietly accumulated losses to improve draft positioning. The sheer number of teams tanking made the 2025-26 season unlike any before. Adam Silver called it the worst year in NBA history for a reason. This wasn't just a few weak teams giving up at the end of the season. It was a widespread problem affecting 10 or more franchises from early in the season through the All-Star break and beyond. Team owners didn't care about fines. One executive even said they'd pay any amount for a top 3 draft pick because it's worth far more than any league penalty. A $500,000 fine for a team worth billions is basically nothing. It's just the cost of doing business the NBA, and gambling. The NBA's close ties with gambling didn't happen overnight. It was a deliberate move, starting before most fans even noticed. Adam Silver led this push. In 2014, while other leagues treated gambling as a threat, Silver saw an opportunity. He wanted the NBA to be the most gambling-friendly league, anticipating changes in U.S. law and culture. That shift came in 2018 when the Supreme Court struck down PASPA, allowing states to legalize sports betting. Americans then bet over $119 billion in a single year. The NBA was ahead of other leagues, already partnering with DraftKings and FanDuel, integrating sportsbook branding into arenas and broadcasts, and even letting owners invest in betting companies. Players like LeBron James and Kevin Durant signed deals with sportsbooks. The line between basketball and betting didn't just blur, it disappeared. This became a major part of the NBA's financial foundation, generating billions of dollars. Why this matters when gambling is tied so closely to the game. Tanking or pulling starters in a close game affects betting integrity. Spreads become meaningless, bettors lose money, and trust in legal sports betting drops. If fans can't trust games will be played honestly, they'll bet less or move to other sports. Since betting is now central to the NBA's business model, this is a huge risk. Scandals and integrity issues. The NBA has seen more gambling-related scandals as its gambling ties grew. Johnny Porter was banned for betting, and a head coach of the Portland Trail Blazers, Phillips, faced charges. These weren't small issues. They involve key people across the league, that it's not just basketball. Baseball and football have had similar problems. Cleveland Guardians pitchers Emmanuel Clase and Luis Ortiz were indicted for pitch rigging. 6 NCAA players were accused of betting schemes. Prop bets, which make up about 70% of sportsbook revenue, are especially risky because they focus on individual performances that can be manipulated. Public trust is falling. Nearly half of Americans, 49%, believe sports betting hurts the integrity of the games they watch.